Hello, and welcome to our panel on the connected workforce. I think a concept more relevant than ever in the world we're living in. I'm Scott Likens with PwC, and I lead our emerging technologies practice. Today we're going to talk about, the amount of immersive and wearable technologies that are available and really how those are being used to do business. If I reflect on what's happened, in the last year, I think this innovation around wearable and immersive technology has really been accelerated, obviously with COVID and other things. But we're going to talk about how to unlock more value for your people, your customers, your business, et cetera. And one of the things that I've been looking at recently is just the amount of maturity happening in virtual reality. Again, a concept, since we're all virtual much more. We recently did a study on, can we use virtual reality in a very different way? And for PwC, we do a lot of training. And I was just blown away at the effectiveness of this new technology. But what we're going to talk about today is the combination of technologies. So as we started to add in AI into that virtual reality, we found that we could really just train our staff in a different way. So today's panel is going to represent some of the, I think, the best thinking out there, whether it's just VR and AR, which we're going to focus on, or it's more broadly what emerging technologies are doing, as they start to combine. And we've created this concept of convergence. So VR plus AI or VR plus AI and IoT together, really exponentially bringing value. And wearables, the technologies, the physical and the virtual together, I think is where we're going to talk today. We've got a great panel. I think we've got an amazing set of thinkers, especially big brand names. And I'm going to get into it with a quick intro, and then we're going to get right to the conversation. So I'm going to start with the person I think is farthest away. Blaine Tookey is a technology principal at BP. And, in his role, he's responsible for solving, BP's business problems, but ones that don't lend themselves to traditional technologies. So Blaine's been focused on things like emerging tech, of course, but wireless communications, advanced sensors, remote sensing, satellite technologies, wearables, IoT, AI, across the spectrum of emerging technologies. And we're going to hear about that in the sense of how it's helping his enterprise. Marco Madrazo is the head of learning experience design at Holiday Inn Club Vacations. I could use a vacation right now, I can tell you. He's been leading the way around innovative ways to actually train people leveraging AR and VR. And prior to that, he worked at Microsoft, and he was leading retail training around some things you may have heard of, like Office 365 and Xbox One. So a really unique perspective on what's happening in this AR/VR world. Next is Michael Leone. He's the director of Lenovo's commercial AR and VR project. And that's a combination of hardware and software incubation, kind of a startup within Lenovo. He's been in the software business for a long time, 25 years, and spent a lot of time in these bigger corporations, but also a lot of time in successful startups. So blending that startup mentality with the big enterprise view of how do we scale this. So we're excited to hear about that. Finally, Brian Laughlin is a technical fellow, and he's a technical fellow of advanced visualizations at Boeing. He's focused on, the wearables, mobile, Internet of Things, and bringing that to life, and obviously strategic development and implementation of those technologies across both Boeing and then their customers and suppliers around the globe. So again, a unique perspective. So I think it's an amazing panel. I'm excited to get into conversations. So I'm going to start off with a round robin. We want to hear from all of you. I want to hear about what your view is on emerging technologies and which ones right now which ones matter the most. And specifically to your business, what are you seeing momentum around? So I'm going to start with Blaine, our farthest away. Blaine, talk to us about what's happening at BP and what's important to you.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone. Well, it is for me at least anyway. In the short term, it's about getting the maximum out of what we call connected devices. This is all focused on how we can make the field worker more efficient by giving them knowledge at the point of work. Now, there are a lot of components that go into this, which is made difficult by, in oil and gas, backhaul comms being difficult, needing explosion-proof devices and location challenges. But we're getting there, and it's starting to make an impact. Of course, there are two other techs that are quite important at the moment, AI and blockchain. They're getting a lot of focus in our company. In AI, there's the low-end voice assistants and chatbots that are getting extensively used for routine and simple tasks. And then going up the scale to things that are probably more of a bigger, longer-term play, it's really about cognitive AI around fault predictions or optimizing process plant. And blockchain is also buzzing right now. It really is ripe for exploration, and we're progressing a number of strands, one which is public, which is a peer-to-peer energy trading platform. And lastly, I can't let this go by without talking about low carbon, because this is BP's latest focus about getting to net zero by 2050, and low carbon is all the rage. Here, remote sensing can play a really important part. And this is driven by the explosion in small and low-cost satellites, the spatial and spectral capability and frequencies to daily. So we're seeing a real powerful technology coming to the fore to help your lower carbon credibility, monitoring your business, and also monitoring trading. And lastly, longer term, hydrogen technology, I think, is going to be a big thing.
That's quite a spectrum, and I assumed that would be the case. So that we're going to get back into the details there. So I'm really excited about that. So next, I'm going to move on to, let's go to Marco. Marco, what's going on in your world? I gave a little preview, but what's happening in emerging tech for you?
Yeah, we got a lot of exciting stuff happening because I'm in a target vertical that people don't often align with innovation when it comes to vacations on our end. But I'm going to approach it from the learning and development perspective. So we are doing some fantastic stuff when it comes to augmented reality and virtual reality playing together. We're creating some amazing simulations that are allowing us to essentially flip the classroom and make it a more immersive experience for leaders that are onboarding into our organization. You see, Scott, one of the challenges that we have is that we're bringing leaders in from different industries that don't understand the complexities of our business, because we're not only providing vacations, we're also selling mortgages. We are, essentially maintaining accounts. We are going out and becoming our own IT department, doing our own contact centers. So there's a lot of complexities to the business that we run. And when we bring new leaders through this, it's very hard for them to visualize what that customer journey looks like. So we've been able to blend AR and VR into an environment where we simulate this for them, and they're able to see that journey come to life, and they're able to see the decisions that are made and the repercussions of those decisions. So it really has been a blessing to have these type of technologies available to our leaders, and it's really had a humongous impact on our organization. That's
amazing, and I can imagine the complexities of a consumer that expects a lot, a large workforce that has to deal with that, and then the physical virtual nature. So I'm excited. We're going to dig in again to that later. So thank you for that. Brian, Boeing. I was a pilot in college. I loved flying. I switched over to software because it was kind of more interesting. But now I've reimagined what flying. It's so interesting now. So talk to us about what Boeing's doing. You've been doing this for a long time, so I'm sure there's a lot of these technologies for you.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be a technologist. I mean, frankly, there's a lot happening. Boeing has a really rich history, in particular with augmented and virtual reality. The term augmented reality was actually coined at Boeing on our 777 program out in Everett. Dr. Tom Caudell and Dr. David Meisel were the two who were working on the wiring loom problem out there. I was a young kid at IPB3 in Wichita working at the subassembly lot time group, and I was looking into wearables at the time, and was actually on some calls, fortunate to be on calls with these guys. So it's pretty interesting. We've been at this for quite a little while. The latest kind of resurgence probably occurred about going on roughly 10 years ago, 6 to 10 years ago. So the big deal about AR and VR in particular is we're largely visual animals. About 60% of our brain is dedicated to visual senses, and probably about 80% of our the input in terms of information comes from that. So when we're talking about building an airplane, these folks have to do some incredible tasks in terms of building these planes. For example, the tanker wiring systems that we're doing, we're putting roughly 2.5 times the wiring in 1 time the airplane. And so you can imagine the complexity in terms of integrating all these systems together. And literally when they do the work, they have to print off about a 20 plus foot long scroll of paper in terms of an engineering drawing. And it'd be bad enough if it was just one particular contiguous wiring diagram, but instead it's a bunch of chopped up sectional views. So from a human factors perspective, these poor folks have to look at each one of these, let's call it 57 just for giggles, right? And it could be more. of these sectional views, and they have to take the highlighter literally and mark the things that are of interest to the job that they're doing. And then they have to think about this, put this assembly together in their head, basically. There's no room to put this on the plane, so they chop it up into a book, and they make a pretty good sized book, and they walk on the plane, and they look up around the plane, and they flip back and forth very quickly and try to assemble this, and then project it, from their brain into the plane environment that they're in. Well, so for AR, what we've been able to do is take HoloLens and basically put all the diagrams and stuff that they need, all the access to the information, and they can simply, through a couple of air taps, they can pull up a menu, and they look up, and the wiring loom is just floating above their heads. So they literally connect the dots. So I did share that because I think a lot of times we kind of say in a buzzword bingo way, we talk about a bunch of different names and different technologies, but these are the ways that this in particular really is impactful for the work statement that we do. So that's just one example. But yeah, and I think IoT is huge. That on our horizon, we're doing a lot of things with virtual reality in terms of training for the space station, International Space Station, if I could just talk. Also, return to Mars deep space habitat. We're doing some work with that. We're using form of virtual reality and AR. It's kind of funny. This is a mix. We have a tool. It's a layout tool that we've created where we can actually lay out a factory on this two-dimensional screen. And then once you get done laying it out, and it's all the CATIA models and stuff, so it's correct dimensionally, we can hit a button and then put on the HoloLens and turn around and walk it one-to-one. So it's absolutely incredible, the capabilities that this, these emerging technologies are offering us. So.
I could have used that putting together some outdoor furniture. I couldn't
Right.
visualize, like that was hard enough. I can't imagine the space station. So thanks for that. So Michael, Lenovo, a brand everyone knows. What's going on in Lenovo in the sense of emerging tech?
Sure. Yeah. Going back to about 3 years ago when I joined the team, Lenovo was going through kind of a transformation inside the company and was trying to set up an incubation area, an incubation bubble, if you will, inside the company to allow emerging tech to kind of blossom and explore and experiment with some of these different areas. And it's been great to see. So I got on board just as that was starting. We've been able to experiment with not only ARVR, which is what I was brought on board to lead, but also other areas like what now is our kind of our smart office products that you'll see, smart conference room type of technologies and things like that. We also started 3 years ago an IoT effort that is now kind of grown out of incubation and is now a formal business unit inside the company as well. And so the idea behind it is really to create this fostered, somewhat secured environment where you don't follow all the red tape and the processes of the big mothership, right? You're able to kind of create these hybrid processes, create new ones in some cases. And, it's easy on paper to do that, right? It's a little bit more of a challenge as you try to roll this out and as you hit some of the processes in other teams, because everything you do, as soon as you leave incubation and you're starting to interact in these cross-functional organizations across the globe, you're inevitably going to run into different challenges. But I think to the company's credit and the executives' credit, they wanted to kind of power through this and push through it. And they knew that they had to bring in people that had some level of entrepreneurial background to kind of pull this off. If you get just, lifelong Lenovo people, they might not necessarily be the right candidates to kind of come in and do this. And so Lenovo did go out across these different incubation areas, these emerging tech areas, and brought, outside people in to kind of help grow the businesses. And it's been great. And so again, ARVR is a big focus for us. That's where I'm focusing. I would lump in kind of viewers or intelligent smart viewer type of technology, which is related to AR. It fits in more to, you can imagine connecting to laptops, connecting to phones and other devices right now in a wire way, but down the road soon, hopefully wireless. And then also this is connected really much, a lot really into our IoT strategy, as well as the edge and 5G and everything else. So Lenovo across the board, we've got our data center group that does all the big data center, supercomputer type stuff. They're driving a lot of this. We're connecting into their cloud infrastructures and their physical infrastructures all the way out to the edge and into the, AR and VR as these new type of edge devices. So quite a lot going on inside of our emerging technology areas.
Excellent, and it resonates. I'm in an accounting firm, and I have an emerging tech lab, so I understand the challenges of the internal, incubation around innovation, but trying to convince a big business that there's value here. So thanks for that. Cool. Well, so what I want to do is get into more specifics, and I'm going to start with Blaine. And I know you were an early evangelist of maybe the expert on your shoulder in your view. And I think about your industry. Some coin the term distant or dangerous or dark areas that we want to help people, but in this new world, flying people around probably isn't as easy anymore. But can you talk to us about what's next for the connected field worker? You mentioned, limited bandwidth, or maybe not, the devices and what's happening there, and just, share what you can, but talk to us about where you see it is today and where it's going in the sense of that connected field worker.
Yeah, for sure. As you observed, I've been an evangelist probably over the last 5 years for this whole next generation worker, the wearables area. And I see a number of strands for this, for sure. The heads-up display, as we've heard from already a bit about that. That's been warming up probably for about 8 years. I remember a device called GoldenEye with a coping technology in it, but never really took off until the last few years with HoloLens, has already been mentioned. And for us, the RealWear device, which is actually the coping GoldenEye was the forerunner for that. We've suddenly seen that capability reach mainstream, if you like, and done lots of pilots and getting uptake in it. But this recent limitation around travel has really put it on steroids, and it's amazing. Everyone and his brother is suddenly wanting this device and getting experience with it and using it for this whole over-the-shoulder coaching, which is, the remote live video and audio to a team back in the office. The AR part of that, still emerging, still very focused on specific solutions. But that's quite exciting that we're starting to see a bit of takeoff in this area. We're also seeing the advent of more and more wearable sensors. So these are still sort of connected boxes of multifunctional devices, things like clinical grade biometrics and environmental sensors. And then, they're sort of getting there now. And then we're seeing the whole body cam, intelligent audio as well. So these devices are going to collect loads of data in real time for us. This is the exciting part of it. And it has a safety play to start off with, but the whole offline analytics allowing us to optimize work and from a safety and efficiency standpoint is what this will give you in the longer term. And then where's that journey going? Well, it's going into something that I call the augmented workers. And this is where the sensor becomes nano size. And you start having AI assistants delivering things like whisper agents into your ear and giving you in front of your eye advice. I think things like smart contact lenses type technology, so you won't actually see what someone is wearing. I've seen prototypes that are already available for that, and a company that's developing them. That's really kind of far out to me. It's exciting to see that, and it's starting to be really powerful. So I predict this world actually of ubiquitous AR. So I think AR, as we heard, is happening, but it's very focused. But we'll start to see ubiquitous AR starting to deliver. In the carpeted space, VR has been used extensively for training, and we've been using it for drilling rigs for a while, and for smart collaboration and for checking out buildings and physical assets. And what I predict is that's going to become really powerful for our workers' collaboration in that carpeted space. And we'll see, as we see, less people in the offices, more people spread out. That's going to bring alive this whole collaboration working space. So that's exciting as well.
Blaine, tell me about as you start to see these new technologies, more recently, is there more engagement by the business, or how are you getting them, excited about it? I think COVID has forced some of that, but are you seeing more acceptance and they're seeing the value?
Yeah, I think there's always been a lot of interest in this space, actually, because it's quite exciting and people can relate to a little bit they're seeing in the consumer space. So I've always got a very engaged community. I think the challenge is how do you get it up the priority list so that people want to action it with all of the other exciting stuff that's going on. And this, as already observed, this is a very exciting technology area. And COVID-19 did that for the heads-up display. I'm starting to see that we're getting into the business on things like wearables, because the whole safety agenda never goes away. It's coming up as being more and more important. It's playing into optimization and efficiency, and the capability is getting more user friendly. So I'm quite excited by the fact that users are more and more open to this, and it's playing into an open door. I think the one challenge in this space is the whole privacy and GDPR. It's not a technology issue, and we've got to manage that. And I think it is very manageable, but that is one of the challenges.
Right. Yeah, I see the same ones. I think that data point is an amazing one to make. Think about IoT, or you start to put on these headsets. It's personal data, so I think it's something we're all going to have to tackle. No matter what the industry. It's just new data. New devices. So great point. So Marco, I'm going to come to you because I know you're using VR in a different way. Different industry, but also very unique. And can you talk to us about what you did internally? Because I think you went through a pretty interesting journey. In the sense of what you're doing around learning.
Before I start, I just got to say, I wish I had Brian's job. I think that's my next career move, because I'm a fanboy of Microsoft because I work there. So obviously HoloLens, I'm all about. With Boeing, it's Boeing or I ain't going. So that's my big deal. When I used to travel, it was all Boeing. I try to go on Boeing planes. I'm a big, huge fan. And then when you start talking about space station, I'm like, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. So I totally
know.
want your
job. How do you beat Space Station, right? Come on. Well, talk to us about vacation clubs, because those are cool.
Yeah, no, that's exciting too. So we're doing a lot of great stuff there, Scott. So one of the things that we really looked at was as I mentioned earlier, a scenario where a leader needs to understand the complexities of our business and bringing that customer journey to life. Because most people think of a customer journey, they're thinking they check into a hotel, they go to the pool, they eat food, they sleep, they check out, and then they go home. And there's so many more components in our industry around that, right? Because the kind of product that we offer is a ownership product, right? Like you're into a membership where you have to pay dues and you have to use your points. And then, there's a capital commitments department that kind of helps you manage your finances when it comes to the vacation investments that you're making. So very complex. So as somebody that's managing an accounting department versus the person that's managing our facility operations, they all need to understand this greater world that they're a part of. So what we used to do was put people through hours and hours and hours of just classroom training of going over the different processes and what this person does. And we even shot really cool videos, but we never immersed them into the actual experience. So one of the concerns of having them shadow and go out and do this is that they might not always experience all of the different customer scenarios that normally come up, right? Like you can have them sit in the middle of the front desk at a certain time and not have any check-ins. So we thought, how do we bring this experience to life so they get to see those customer touch points happening? And more importantly, let them make decisions and see the ramifications of those decisions. So my team of instructional designers, were also developers, took it upon themselves to learn how to use Unity and Vuforia to really bring AR to life. And this is really a skill that we all learned from scratch ourselves, using a lot of resources. So we went out and we essentially designed a scavenger hunt, let's call it that, around one of our key resorts here in the Orlando area. And essentially we had different stations at the different touch points. So we had one at the front desk, we had one in our villa, we had another one by the pool. So we had like 8 different stations altogether. And essentially what this is that leaders would, instead of being in a classroom, we would flip that and put them on a golf cart without the beer. We learned that early on. You don't need the beer as part of that. We would let them go ahead and navigate to each one of these stations and essentially hold up the tablet, and they would see this scenario come to life in the actual spot where it would normally happen at this resort, right? And at that point, as things are happening, they would get prompts where they get to kind of decide their own fate, choose your own adventure. If you ever done Bandersnatch and Netflix, that was kind of our inspiration, I'll be honest with you. So you get to kind of click the thing, and then you get to see what happens. And whether it's right or wrong or in between, you get to kind of live with the repercussions of your decision. And we feel that that's the best way for people to learn and really immerse themselves into our culture and our ways of working. One of the stations, that's where we were able to blend VR, right? Because one of the things that we used to do early on in early iterations is that we would have the AR almost like play a video of what a villa looks like and what the renovation cycles, because we are an HOA-based organization. There are HOA budgets and renovations we have to work with. So what we did instead is we said, how cool would it be if they got to that station right? And they scanned and they got that scenario. But before they solved it, we gave them the option of actually looking around the villa without the goggles. And then we would put on these Oculus Quest on them, and they would actually be able to see what a renovated villa would look like. And they get to take the goggles off, put them back on really quick. And then they got to walk over to a certain area and they got to experience like the difference, and they got to click little notes, and they got to see why there a tube TV, but all of a sudden there's like a flat screen TV here, right? Like, and they got to understand that HOAs, don't always like to invest in certain things like that, right? And that they get to be the driver in what we get to renovate and not get to renovate. So I think that that's an active way of teaching them not only about how cool our vacation spaces are, but teaching them the intricacies of our business and how we have to operate within HOA budgets. So I think this choose your own adventure or scavenger hunt going around the resort really brings an experiential component, but it blends AR and VR just enough to make it something worthwhile where they get a little bit of learning. And who doesn't like to go around in a golf cart and hang out all day in a pretty resort, right?
Well,
so,
with certain constraints, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, no, that's amazing. I think that's such a great example. You're starting to mix that physical virtual world. If you think about where we're going, as you mentioned, that choose your own adventure with AI, now we can start to make that very dynamic so that leader specifically, one day the training will be, just for them, right? Based on how they're learning. So I think it's a great example. Can you see that kind of rolling out, broadly to the enterprise? Are you starting to get really good uptake with it?
Oh, we are, right? So talking about emergent trends, I mean, like eventually we want to turn Bandersnatch into Pokemon Go, and I can get into that later. But one of the things that we're doing is that the organization sees the value because, again, we're targeting new leaders joining the organization. And as we grow, and even through COVID, we've been blessed that we're still growing, that we're bringing in people from outside the industry and they're going, gee, this is amazing. Could we potentially use this for our customers when we're selling to them, right? Because we are selling a membership product to them, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of like talking them through this pitch, could we throw a pair of goggles on them and let them experience different things? So if they happen to be in Orlando and they wanted to see what Gatlinburg's, amenity center looked like. They don't have to go to Gatlinburg to experience that before making their buying decision. We could put goggles on them and let them experience that right in Orlando, right? So that's just giving you a very vague example of different ideas that have come up from our IT and branding groups on how we can utilize an L&D innovation. And think about that. I'm going to say that again, a learning and development innovation in the actual business with our customers, which again, we've never been able to do before. And I am extremely humbled that we get to be in that position.
No, it's amazing the possibilities you think about. I think learning is one of the biggest areas to tap into. Just a side note, we did a study on this, and people learn faster. So there's an upside, there's an ROI. We even looked at classroom and e-learning, and VR at scale was cheaper in the long run. So you think about that, the opportunities are really, really there. So thanks for sharing that story. I think we're going to come back to some of that. But Michael, I want to go to you and start to talk about your role at Lenovo. And I know it's such a unique kind of hardware, software. It's an ecosystem. Can you talk to us about how you're bringing that all together, partnerships, et cetera, and adoption overall? I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, so as I mentioned, about 3 years ago when I came on board, one of the reasons why I joined Lenovo was I felt I came from another AR startup prior to that. And, I felt like even while it was fun to do entertainment and look at AR from a consumer perspective, I felt like it was going to be one of the technologies that was going to require the enterprise to kind of drive it forward first. And then the right kind of consumer experiences would follow. And I really wanted to go to a company that had that same vision. And so when I interviewed with Lenovo and talked to the leaders, I also said I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a hardware play, which is what I was worried about, given Lenovo's history, right, with all the ThinkPads and workstations and everything. What we really quickly started talking about in those first meetings was a software platform being the central focus of everything we were going to do, and that it was going to be a solution sale and not just throwing something over the fence, which is, I think Brian and others can attest to that have gone through this over the years. Just having a vendor say, hey, good luck, thanks for buying our headsets and walking away, that doesn't really help you solve your problem, right? It just creates more problems for you. And so we intentionally went into it with a vision to try and solve customer problems. That was like our mantra that we were saying to everybody across the organization. And that software platform was how we started. And so the software platform utilizes some cloud components, in terms of infrastructure, device management, app provisioning, and things that you need in an enterprise environment, and integrating into the enterprise legacy systems that are there. Most large enterprises, if we're talking Fortune 1000, already have device management. Okay, that's fine. Integrate with them and don't try to convince them that they have to buy yours, was kind of another one of the tenets. But then we also, knew that we would have to have an SDK and some partners for development. And we started off with the vision of going after what we call kind of the build scenarios, the people who have Unity developers, people that have kind of kicked the tires, had gone through stuff with either the early HoloOnes devices or some of the other partners that are out there, maybe struggled a little bit, but at least got that experience. And we wanted to be able to do that, because if your vision is ever to integrate with key ISVs, you need some maturity in your APIs and in your SDK and stuff. And so we really wanted to kind of grow that properly. If we would have started out the gate with an off-the-shelf kind of app strategy, it would have taken us a lot longer to get to the market and to get the right kind of feedback that I think we needed from our customer base to help drive the strategy. And so ultimately, what we ended up doing with this solution sale is, again, large software platform, infrastructure pieces, SDK pieces for developers. Then we also developed our own hardware. So we've got our A6 glasses that are kind of similar in capability to a HoloLens, very much 3D, world-focused, high compute kind of focus, full sensor suites, built for comfort, wearing for long periods of time, things like that. But then we also wanted to be very agnostic when we put all this together. So our software platform supports HoloLens, it supports our glasses, it supports RealWear, it supports phones and tablets. Because again, a customer is not going to have one, or most customers don't have one use case, right? They've got 3 internal large business units that might have 10 use cases in each one of them. And so again, you want to be able to have a platform and think through how are you going to integrate in and solve problems across all those use cases. And that's why we call it a solution play for us. It's really hardware, software, and then we've got services, we've got professional services consulting, we've got partnerships with our key systems integrators who are trained on our platform and our SDK. And so if a customer says, hey, we've got all these great business use cases, but we don't have Unity developers, can you help us out? We say yes. We don't walk away and say good luck on your project. So the idea is to bring in the right systems integrators, to bring in and vet the right ISVs. And so you have more of an end-to-end solution. And that's kind of where we are now, as we've transitioned, built that SDK and built the upfront kind of build option. And now working with partners like HoloOne and some others that we've vetted, we pulled them into our environment. We've done tight integration. Their web portal becomes our web portal. The vendors and the customers deal with us, right? They deal with Lenovo. They don't have to go negotiate with 5 different startups to kind of get a solution going. There's just Lenovo they have to work with. And we pulled in the integration as well as from the business model perspective. It made it very easy for them to engage and build a solution.
It's such a unique blend of hardware and software. It's interesting. It's a hard skill to start to find, right? You think about someone that can think about Unity in 3-dimensional, design, but yet build it for scale for an enterprise to do training, like others have mentioned. I mean, it's a really hard thing to find right now. Are you seeing more and more startups that are kind of going after this area? And obviously with the ecosystem that helps you,
Sure.
But what's your view of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some have come and gone. I think you'll see that there's been a lot of hardware startups that have kind of come and gone, or have suffered, or had to morph into different, like a Magic Leap, where they've had to change their focus from consumer more into commercial. On the software side, you're seeing more startups, I think, especially over the last 1.5 years, 2 years, really with the remote assist, remote expert type of use cases driving a lot of those ISVs into the space, because that was, I wouldn't necessarily call it the killer use case, because it's more of a horizontal play across many different verticals. But that's driving a lot of the ISVs. And so our job is really to kind of look out at that field. We can get our own opinion about which ones we think are best of breed, but then ultimately it's the conversations we're having with our customers. They're the ones that are also doing their own evaluations, and we try to find out which ones they're most interested in we try to get ahead of the curve and do that pre-integration, let our customers know that, yes, we agree. Those are our top 3 ISV partners as well. And here's what we're doing with them. And here's our roadmap with them. And, and so we're always looking out at the ISVs and the software startups in the space for sure, because we're not going to, we went into it not being arrogant enough to think that we're going to build a giant platform that's going to meet everyone's needs, right? Intentionally, there's going to be gaps that we want to fill with a best of breed partner, right? That was the idea from day one, and that's still our strategy now.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So Brian, we're going to go to you, and I think everyone's interested in space, but can you talk to us about, in the sense of what Boeing's doing? Obviously, you've been in the industry a while. The industry has changed, but it also hasn't. We're still flying planes the same way. But what are you doing around advanced visualizations, and what's your perspective on wearables, right, versus instrumenting an airplane?
I think Blaine had a really good point when he was talking about. I think things are going to be faster. They're going to be more integrated, and they're going to be smaller. I mean, just in a nutshell. And DARPA actually did a lot of the pioneering work on the contact lenses that Blaine was talking about, and I think those have now been taken over by. I'm not even going to say because I can't remember. I should be able to quote that, but I can't right now. But that's a really good point. Say again.
Mojo.
Oh, okay, cool, very cool. Yeah, there's another one of the another big company. There's a couple of them that are looking at this, but also, and I think that Michael had some really good points with, he's talking. I appreciate that perspective of humility. I think that's really important. A lot of times as IT people, we come off, frankly, we kind of come off as a little bit heady. Like I know exactly what you need, and we that type of stuff. And Michael's, the approach he's taken is exactly the right one, because I mean, nobody is interested in ripping and replacing their entire platform just so I can use your device. I mean, and there's one particular company that has made that work, but it almost was the undoing of them initially. So I think that's really awesome. Then I think that the innovation that Marco is bringing it is exactly right. Where these guys are focusing more on the process, right? And that's the key. So we're doing a lot of really great things, I feel like, at Boeing with AR, XR, VR technologies. But I think that the head fake and all this stuff is, and these guys have alluded to it in the things that they're talking about, is that it's not about the product, it's about the process. And a lot of times we miss that. Like, we get so myopically focused, and I think it goes back to, are you guys familiar with Simon Sinek's Start With Why? Excellent book, right? Yeah. So he talks about how, companies lose focus of what their why is. And their why is, what problem are you trying to solve? And then we have how, which is what methods and techniques do we use to solve that problem? And then what is the products that we end up creating as a result? Well, a lot of times over time, because how we monetize that stuff, we begin to identify ourselves as the what instead of the original why. And I think it makes us myopic. And so we start to focus on products and things instead of processes. And technology is never the answer. It's always an enabler for a good business process. Well, it could be a bad one too, good or bad, right? So I think that what we have to start to shift to, and one of the things I think has been really helpful for us, specifically in the XR space, is our approach is not to look at a HoloLens or a Google Glass or a GoldenEye. And it warmed my heart to hear that. I haven't talked to Jeff for a while, that he's from Copen. But yeah, see a smile, he knows who Jeff is. So, but to quit focusing on what these devices are and focus more on what do they enable us to do. Because that's what we really care about. Nobody who ever bought a drill wanted a drill, they needed a hole. And that's what we've got to start solving for. And it also follows, if you think about things in that perspective, more of a systems type approach, that's where IoT and all these things start to come into play, right? Each of these technologies they're amazing and astounding in their own, and they do some really incredible stuff. But the real power is going to be when we unlock this by making these things conversant so they talk to each other. And now we can snap together, these things as electronic Legos and create solutions on the fly that consist of a little bit of IoT. So I have contextualization from the environment. I can put together a little bit of AR in there, so I can put a digital asset into the environment and see how that would interact with other things. So I think that's where the future of this kind of stuff is going. And that's the kind of things that we're trying to drive at Boeing through use of the IFLT I talked about. We're laying out shop areas. And by the way, another thing for the space deal, that's on NASA's SLS. I'm doing Factory of the Future right now. So it's pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm a lucky guy. Although riding on the golf cart with the beer doesn't sound too bad either, but it's pretty awesome. We get to do some really neat stuff. And I love that I get a chance to meet with you guys, and I always get a kick out of how much I learn from listening to the different things that you guys are doing and kind of doing some benchmarking, if you will, for the different aspects, the way you guys are looking at it and how you're applying it. And it's super cool. So I hope I answered the question. I'm just happy to be here with you guys. It's really cool stuff. One thing I will say, I don't know if any of you guys are gamers at all, but most of us have heard of a little game called Fortnite that made the first $1 billion, right? So we, in particular, doing the return to Earth stuff from the space station launch. Basically, what we do is we can put an Oculus on the astronauts, and they can go through the reentry sequence with the Oculus and then take it off and actually do it. So it's pretty cool.
Wow.
We're working with Unreal on that. So the visuals and Leighton Carr is one of my teammates, one of my guys. Amazing, just does incredible work. I've got such an incredible group of folks that back me up. Steve Franzman, David Aguilar, Richard Moore is kind of my partner in crime in terms of leading all of these activities. We have some just really brilliant top shelf. Some of the stuff Leighton's doing is approaching AAA game quality, but Unreal, that engine and the visualizations from that in the virtual reality sense are just mind blowing. There's some stuff if you go out there and search on a little bit, NASA, Boeing, VR, you'll probably come up with it, and I can try to get with you guys later and send some links if you're interested. But
yeah, that sounds awesome.
Very fascinating, all that stuff.
It's a lot of fun.
I think across all of these industries, there's commonalities, but wow, such a different amount of ideas. And I know the audience is going to be really interested in asking questions, so we're going to go to that next. But I wanted to thank you all. I mean, what an amazing set of brands and enterprises and thinking and intellect. So that was really fun for me. I learned a lot, and I'm excited about the future. I'm nervous, I want to do it responsibly, but I'm excited. I think technology is going to be used for the better of society, and I think that's going to be a great thing. So we're going to go to the audience for questions. I know they're going to pick your brains on some of these topics, and we're excited to do that. So let's go there now.